Robert Arnold Berk, who was born July 13th, 1929, and passed away a few weeks ago, October 7th, 2017. Bob was born in Passaic, New Jersey. He is survived by his wife, Patricia, his children, Julie, Jim, Michael, his grandchildren, Nicole, Ashley, Lauren, Aaron, Austin, and his great-grandchild, Pierre. He was predeceased by his wife, Joan, of 47 years, and his oldest child, Kathy. Bob married Patricia on February 2nd, 2002, or 222, and into a loving family. They love traveling, cruises, and celebrating with family. From the earliest days growing up in Taunton, Massachusetts, through military school, Syracuse University, and in the Air Force, where Bob served as a first lieutenant, Bob was known as the funny guy. His passion for acting played an integral role throughout his life, with parts in community and dinner theater, movies, and television. He will be remembered by his many friends and family for his humor, his heart, and his love of life. Would you bow with me as we pray together? Our great God, El Shaddai, the Elohim, we approach your great and magnificent throne to thank you for allowing us to share in the life of Bob Berk, our husband, dad, grandpa, and friend. But most of all, he is your son. May our time together evoke memories of Bob that remind us of your grace and love as Bob loved us and we love him. Bless us and give us strength. In his name, amen. For me, there were a lot of things that were ambiguous about Bob. I didn't know if he was ambiguous or just very versatile. For example, first time I met him, he invited me to see his play, Joey and Marie, the Italian wedding. And we went there with a group of people from church. And when we went there, here I am seeing this guy that I've seen in church. And the first time he shows up as a mafia don. And then he comes back on as a priest. Which one is it? Not only that, this kind, lovable, wonderful man who was a little bit older than me, almost twice my age, would come in and he was so kind and nice, but you put him on a racquetball court and look out. He would squash the remains out of people very much younger than him. He was also the only person in church who believed in the holy kiss. He would come up and give you a smack right on the mouth. I was not used to that, but he was a little bit different from me. But I learned very quickly that Bob loved acting and theater, but when he loved you, it was no act. He really loved. So whether you are a family member, a friend, or just, as Bob might say, I'm just here for the food. We invite you to laugh, to reflect, and yes, have your hankies out, even to cry, as we join together in this party and ponder this wonderful person, the wonderful life he lived, Robert Arnold Berk, who touched our lives in so many ways. We're going to have different people come up and speak to you today. When you come up, I forgot to let you know, you can either use this microphone or there are some microphones down on the side that you can use, and you can scoot those a little bit forward so that they fit you. We're going to do some singing today. We're going to start off with Bob, one of his friends, Bob, who's going to lead us in a song.
I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever sound of his voice is so sweet, the birds hush their singing, and the melody that he gave to me within my heart is ringing. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. I'll stay in the garden with him, though the night around me be falling, but he bids me go through the voice of woe. His voice to me is calling, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known.
Good morning. My name is Jim Berk, and I have the good fortune of being one of the three children of Bob. And to all of you, on behalf of my brother, Michael, his wife Melanie, their sons Aaron and Austin, my sister Julie, her husband Nick, Julie's daughter Nicole, her husband Xavier, and their son Pierre, my wife Jane, and our daughters Ashley and Lauren, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join all of us to remember my dad. Thought it was funny that when the music came to an end, if you notice, there was No Business Like Show Business was playing, and it actually, the lyrics were, it's time to get on with the show. And it's just, that was either coincidence or Isaiah, Patricia's grandson, who put the wonderful photo montage together, brilliant production on his part. So thank you, Isaiah. I'd also like to thank my dad's wife, Patricia, for all that she did to organize this gathering today. It was important to her to really have this chance for us to collectively pause and take a moment to remember her husband of almost 15 years, our father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. You know, Patricia's instinct was right. It's good that we're here, not so much to mourn, but just to remember that my father lived a life worth living. Now, Julie, Michael, and I wanted to collectively give you a little insight into the man who many of you got to know through Patricia. So, who is Robert Arnold Berk, a.k.a. Robbie, when he was growing up as a young boy, Bob, First Lieutenant, Dad, Papa, Grandpa, Pastor Fazul, Mr. Bob, or even at his bar mitzvah, his Hebrew name, Azriel. And to us, his life breaks down into three segments. There's the dad we didn't know, the one we knew, and the one we got to know. Now, the dad we didn't know, as was mentioned, was born in Passaic, New Jersey. He had an older brother, Howard, who he was extremely close to his entire life. Howie and Bobby were rambunctious, to say the least. No surprise, probably, to this group. Howard was the rebel, and Dad, who so looked up to his bigger brother, was always along for the ride. His nickname growing up as a young boy was What No Fourths, because the one time he actually didn't ask for a fifth helping of food, people said, "What, no fourths?" And that literally became his nickname as a child. So he grew up in Taunton, Mass, and in a middle-class neighborhood with a sweet mother and a strong-willed but caring father. He went to the local high school. He distinguished himself in sports, theater, and general tomfoolery. He was a good student, despite the fact that whenever he wanted to take a day off, He would organize the few other Jewish kids at the school. He would make up a fictitious name for a fictitious Jewish holiday and convince the unwitting non-Jewish administrators and send them on their way. 6 to 10 times a year, according to his telling. You know, his penchant for humor, athletics, and socializing continued during his time at Syracuse University and when he left Valley Forge to study law. At one point, he did think he was going to become a lawyer, only to change his mind after a year because, as he would tell us, he missed being away from our mom, who he was dating at the time at Syracuse. So that leads us to the second dad, the dad we knew. This is the one we grew up with. After graduating, he immediately married our mom, Joan Goodman, and Dad went to work with his father during a time to launch a store that was like Target before Target existed. They had a winning concept, but just too early for its time, and they had a good run. But most important, we think, they had Kathy, our older sister, Julie, Michael, and me. And despite a full house of kids, Dad found time for community theater and sports. We remember him as a constant source of fun, humor, and activities. Fortunately, our mother provided balance by running the house and attempting to provide some sense of discipline, mostly to Dad, as he was generally the biggest kid in the house. I believe it's something Patricia can relate to on many levels. Now, during this time, Mom and Dad had a wide circle of friends, and Dad was usually the center of attention, mostly in a good way. And my parents' closest friends were Barbara and Jimmy Green. And when Barbara heard of Dad's passing, she asked that I just share with you the following. Our two families led parallel lives. Our kids were the same age, and our families spent countless hours together. After Joan passed, Bob always found time to call. They always started with him saying, "Hi, Boozy. It's Bob." And Boozy was a shortened version of bosom buddy. And that's how my mother referred to Barbara, and as they were each dearest friends. Of course, it was Bob calling, she'd say. Who else would start a conversation calling somebody Boozy? So that's how they kept their connection to my mother alive for what she will be forever grateful for. And she misses those calls. With love, Barbara, aka Boozy. Now, like most families, ours had its share of challenges at various times, but as Julie, Michael, and I look back, we wouldn't trade this time, and our spouses, Jane, Melanie, and Nick, along with our grandkids and great-grandkids, each have their own memories. Jane attempting to color his hair when he decided he didn't want to be gray, leaving it on too long and having an entire helmet of black on his head. His racquetball games with Nick each time he visited. His weekly date nights with Ashley to the mall for chicken bowls and Rice Krispie treats. And every Leslie Nielsen comedy marathon movie night. With Lauren to 7-Eleven to get their Slurpees. Every possible opportunity he could find to see Austin and Aaron play football and baseball. And visiting Nicole for play dates at the beach with his great-grandson Pierre. Or now about, the 2 years our parents lived on the boat was a wild time for them. Or moving our family to LA with no job after visiting his brother for 1 week in the middle of winter and finding out you don't have to live in cold weather. Who could forget his award-winning run as Pastor Fazul in Joey and Maria, or his award-winning performance as the creepy night manager in the classic horror film It Lives by Night, which got him a SAG card, which I'm sure he told all of you about. So now to the third phase that we affectionately refer to as the Patricia years. We saw Dad evolve, and we have Patricia to thank for that. Bottom line, she did a good job domesticating him. Seriously, Dad became a better person because of her. We loved how they traveled together and that he was attentive to her. He found greater enjoyment spending time with his great-grandchildren and all the students at the local elementary who affectionately referred to him as Mr. Bob. Now, over the past decade and a half, Dad was able to embrace more fully all the good that was right in front of him. And it allowed him to develop a closer relationship with Julie, Mike, and I, each in our own unique and different way. So when you lose somebody suddenly, you immediately think, what will you no longer have the chance to say? And as much as we would have loved to have many more conversations, Julie, Mike, and I felt that we left little unsaid with Dad, and that gives us comfort. We know his life had purpose because he married our mother and had Kathy, Julie, Mike, and me, and he had a wonderful life with Patricia. Our families will remember all that was good in him and take it to heart as we carry on. So where does that leave us? Sad that we lost our father, particularly in such a sudden and unexpected way. And while we don't know the last moments, what we did know is he was living a happy life. And up to and on the day he died. That gives us comfort. What we do know is they had many good people in his life, like all of you. And that makes us happy. And what we know is there wasn't a day that went by where he didn't laugh or make somebody else laugh. And we know that he spent the last decade and a half in a loving marriage to a wonderful woman. And for that, we'll always be thankful to Patricia. So most of all, we knew that he loved us, and he knew we loved him. So, again, to all of you, thank you for being here today. It means the world to Patricia and so much to Julie, Mike, and me. So, with that, sorry to do that, I want you to meet my daughters, Ashley and Lauren.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley. This is my sister,
Hi,
Lauren.
I'm Lauren.
Nothing makes us cry like our father crying.
I know.
So, as my father had mentioned, my grandfather grew up Jewish, and so we thought it would be appropriate to quickly do the Jewish prayer for the dead. To give you a little background, the Kaddish, which was written predominantly in Aramaic, is one of the most well-known prayers in Jewish liturgy, as well as known outside the Jewish world. When read, it arouses a sense of great reverence, mystery, thought, and contemplation, as well as a deep sense of community. It is often thought of synonymously with death, whether recited for an individual at a funeral or en masse for the 6 million that perished in the Holocaust. It also gives children the opportunity to continue the mitzvah to honor thy father and mother, which is enforced in death as in life. So excuse us, because we have not done this since our bat mitzvahs.
We're brushing up.
And so it's been a long time, but Yit Gadal Vit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, Balma Divra Hirute, Vayamal Hirute, Bachai Yakol, Uvmechol, Uvechol, Dechol Beit Yisrael, Balaga Uvmin Karamin Vimru Amen.
Yehei Shmei Rabbah, Mim Barach, La'alam, U'ala, Mi Al Maya.
Yit Barach, Vit Shabbat, Vit Parar, Vit Ma'am, Vit Naseh, Vit Hadar, Mitaye, Vit Halal, Shmei Kudusha, Berechu, Elmin Devra, Hirata, Shirata, Tushbachata, Mivinta Tamata, Dahamayra, Balma, Vrimu Amen.
Yehei Shlama Rabbah, Min Shemaya, V'chayim, Al Venu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru, Amen. Osei Shalom Bimramav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'akol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen.
Let me interpret. Not going to happen. I knew Bob for about 16 years, and not as articulate as Jim to sum up those 16 years in 5 minutes. I don't know how. So the only way I can think of is with a song and a dance. So that's not going to happen either. If I were Bob, I might be able to do that. I really believe he could. Because he sang and he danced his way into my mom's heart, and into my family's heart, and into my reticent heart. I wasn't real thrilled with Bob coming along when he did. That's just me. And when we first met, I put out my hand to shake his. I was going to be cordial and everything, and we were going to meet, and I was going to try to find, is there any reason why these two should not be wed? I'm going to find it. And I learned a whole different way of being greeted. And fortunately, I was quick enough to avoid the very sacred area right here, that first greeting, and he just got me on the cheek. But we met for the second time over at my mom's house alone. The first time was with a group. I don't know if my mom was afraid that I might do something to him. But the second time we got together, we met over at her house, and we found out that we shared a favorite movie, Ben-Hur, one of our favorites. And boy, could Bob talk about movies. I mean, the stuff that he could tell you about them is like, who's ever paid attention to that stuff? I don't know who the secondary third or fourth or fifth character was in this show, but he did. And the director and the producer. I started paying attention more to some of these side things that I hadn't noticed before. That was also one of his effects on me. And at that meeting, he said he'd give me a huge reward if I could tell him Judah Ben-Hur, which was played by Charlton Heston in the movie, if I could tell him his number on the ship that he rowed on when he was rowing for the Roman army and chained to those oars. And I said, sure, it's 41. I wish we had taken a video of his look on his face when I told him that. That would have been priceless. But he was amazed that I knew that, and eventually I had to fess up to how I knew that. We had watched the show just a couple of days before that, again, and I was 41 at the time. So when they said his number, it kind of stuck. I'm glad he didn't ask me the second question he asked me, the names of all the horses. It was like, they had names? Okay, something more to pay attention to in life. So our relationship did not start off with me just welcoming him into the family. And what was weird about that situation there with him asking me that question, and it was unknown to me at the time, that's when I think we began to bond. Because I had visibly and shockingly impressed him, and that meant something to me. I didn't really realize how much it meant to me at the time. And we had talked over the last few years about watching all of the approximately 4 some odd hours of this show together. And over Labor Day weekend, I just happened to remember to pack it and bring it with us just on the off chance we might have time, and we watched it over this past Labor Day weekend. All 4 hours, the interlude of music at the beginning, the intermission music between. So we got the full bore of that, and it was wonderful getting to do that together. The first part we just watched without commentary. We just watched it, and the second part we turned on Charlton Heston and some movie buff that was in there who knew a bunch of trivia stuff like Bob about movies, and got to listen to them comment on it, and we talked back and forth about some of their comments, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful time. And it was over that long weekend, after the umpteenth hug and now kiss on the lips, that I had realized that this man whom I had balked at coming into our family, I'd begun to think of as Dad. I don't think I ever would have called him that, as far as actually saying the words, because he didn't raise me, and no matter how many hugs and kisses, I don't think I would have, but I got to tell you, I'm not so sure, because I don't think at the point that I met him, I ever would have thought that I would have thought of him that way. So when he took his grand leave, as he did here a little over a month ago, it was really shocking and hard to take. But that's where he was in my heart. And I'm going to remember his smile. I'm going to remember his cutting up and his singing over things I never thought you could sing over. That would bring a smile or maybe at least a lighter heart to another. Some of his insightful questions that I never would have thought to ask myself or ask others that I heard him ask them, even complete strangers. But they weren't strange after his questions and stuff. They were starting to become part of his greater family about different things in life. His childlike excitement at many things. It was just, I mean, who gets excited over a $1 breakfast burrito at McDonald's? I just, okay. And for someone his age, that was inspiring to me, that And it inspires me to look at my age differently. I mean, why grow up stoic and grave looking in your demeanor and being? Why not be more like Bob when you greet your various situations throughout life? To me, this is all worth remembering and much, much more. And Bob, I'm going to miss you being here, but I will do everything I can to remember you being here.
I brought these just in case. I'm Bruce. I'm married to Pat's oldest daughter, Debbie, and a big group of these people in the middle are my children and grandchildren, and they know Bob as Papa Bob. And so the shirt is in reference to that picture of that little boat, that dinghy in the back, that yacht that he had. And this actually, I bought this shirt this year, which is unusual for me. I wore it down in September when we went down to Newport. And Bob fell in love with this shirt, so I said, okay, I'm wearing this shirt today, so no tie, which I don't do ties anyway. But this is to honor Bob, because his love of the ocean and ships. We'd sit out on the deck there at Newport, and I'd point out a boat to him. He says, well, that's not a boat. That's a ship. I said, okay, I'm not going to argue with a guy that had a yacht, you know. What do I know? But I have a few things I want to share. The first time that I met Bob officially was at one of his performances with the Joy Maria's wedding. Now, Bob being forever the actor, the world is his stage, he set me up. So we're at, and I realize we're in church and we have church people here, so I'll make this very PG. I'm eating my spaghetti, and unbeknownst to me, Bob has already set up a little scenario with one of the actresses. I believe it was Maria. And let's say that her wedding dress wasn't holding her all in. So I'm sitting there with a mouthful of spaghetti, and the next thing I know, here's this lady in my space. And I'm going, I almost choked to death. And I look up at Bob, and he's dying laughing. He said, okay, gotcha. And that is exactly how my first memory was of Bob, but will always be a treasured memory. By the way, the spaghetti wasn't that good after that. The other things that have been mentioned by many already, but the first time that we went to the movies, he couldn't wait to get that SAG card out. Yeah. Screen Actors Guild, flip it down and go in for free. Now, the generosity of him, of course, he paid for me. I was ready to pay. He says, no. I said, we got one for free. I'll pay for the second one. But he always liked to talk about the movie industry, and as Frank was mentioning, and Jim also, his interaction with, and where the world is a stage. And really, if you think about Bob, that's exactly how it is. I know there's some teachers here from the school, and my wife is a retired school teacher. I just retired from working 36 years in schools, and so I know what he could bring to the table in a classroom setting to teach. And he didn't have to have a teaching credential. He had the life that he had lived and how he could present himself. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But going along with the movie trivia, I mean, he was always trying to stump everybody in the family with his vast knowledge. Sometimes I don't know if he was telling the truth, but he impressed me, so. He had enough times that I knew he was right, so I just had to go with that. He would tell me stories about when he would go and see a couple of actors that were his friends, Mickey Rooney and Dick Van Patten. Now, when he would go to see Dick Van Patten, it was always, it was a different setup than it was with Mickey. When he went to go see Mickey, he always had to stop by the bank because Mickey didn't pay for anything. So Bob always had to make sure that he paid. That was the way Mickey Rooney was. Going back to the reading to the school children, I watched Bob in action with my grandchildren and how he would interact and do crazy, silly things. You know, Like this picture right here. I mean, that's Bob. And he doesn't need a prop. He used his nose. And he was proud of that nose. But those were the kind of things that he would do, and silly little things, and you think, well, okay, here's an older gentleman, you're getting to a point in your life, you need to behave. Not Bob. No. His behavior was, let's have a good time. Let's entertain. Let's have some fun. He told me stories about reading the stories to the children at the school, and and I could just see him take a story, a Dr. Seuss book or something, and he would be totally in character and read that to those kids, and those kids would be enthralled. He told me a story about when he was at Costco, his second favorite place for the $1.50 hot dog. I mean, I think he had a weekly date with a couple of his friends, and Alan, and they would go and then have their $1.50 hot dog. And by the way, I also partake of the $1.50 hot dog. But he said he was there one time, and he was shopping, and all of a sudden he hears this little tiny voice, Mr. Bob, Mr. Bob. And here comes one of his little students, come up and give him a big hug, and he said that really made an impression on him because, there's all these other people in there, and this little child was that impressed with what he brought to the table and when he presented himself at the school. So I thought the teachers might like to hear that. That was one of the things. So I could probably go on, and I'm not going to do that, but I want to leave you with one thing, and I know this is something that each and every one of us can put into our lives and remember every day. There's a commercial on TV for a battery company. Every time I see an ad with the Energizer Bunny Rabbit, that's Bob. That is Bob. I mean, even he was so proud of his pacemaker. Here, feel it. I said, I don't want to feel your pacemaker. But that was his little battery pack. So every time I see an Energizer Bunny Rabbit ad on TV or anywhere, that's Bob. Thank you.
Like an actor, Bob knew how to improvise. You got me? Yeah. Bob knew how to improvise. It was always looking for ways to entertain or to share with others. Right now we're going to have speakers from Amelia Earhart, where Bob volunteered, come up and tell us a little bit about his interaction with them. There's microphones down at the bottom or up at the top. It's up to you.
Well, it's the perfect segue was the Costco segment because that's the last place I saw Mr. Bob. I came back, I would go away for the summer, and I came back right before school started with my girls, and we're walking through the food court. He was probably eating his hot dog. And I was like, Mr. Bob! And we gave a big hug, and he introduced me to his friend, and it was so good to see him. He really touched me. He was kind of like my desert grandpa because I don't have family here. And he read to my class every week. He came in and he would have his stories to read. But what we loved the most were his childhood stories about him being mischievous and getting into trouble. And with his brother, and he would tell us about his movies and his, the Bat movie, and he'd do all his animations, and the kids just ate it up. The first time he came to visit us, I was sitting in the back of the room. I gave him the floor, so I just kind of stayed in the back and let him talk with the children, and his stories of his childhood and how things were, and his animations and his laughter made me cry, but a happy cry because it reminded me of stories my grandma would tell me, and the exact same way. And it just felt like it was meant to be that Mr. Bob was in my classroom telling us these wonderful stories that kids don't hear anymore. They don't hear how things were back in the 30s and 40s. And I was just so blessed that my kids could experience him. And although he would come in with stories to read, we begged for him to tell us his childhood stories or movie stories or his pilot stories in the Korean War. He would tell us his war stories, and the kids were just fascinated. And he would do all his little horn noises with his fingers, and he would write little songs to the kids every week. He came in, he'd bring out his little notebook with a song that he wrote for the kids, and he would point to them and sing to them, and he would rub their heads. And he was just a blessing for us to have, and so grateful that we were able to experience him. And it was all about the kids. If I was going to be gone a Wednesday, I'd be, "Oh, Mr. Bob, I'm not going to be here on Wednesday." And he's like, "Dear, I adore you, but it's all about the kids. No offense." So, yeah, I will miss Mr. Bob, and so will all the staff and students at Earhart. He was truly a big part of our lives.
Hi. Not easy. I lived 45 years listening